Welcome, guys. We are live again, as always. Every single Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. we go live and we talk about real estate, property investment, investing, markets, what's happening in the markets, everything and everything is open for discussion. And so please do jump in with any questions that you have. I'll be happy to answer them. One of the things that I'm going to say is, and I'm going to actually post it as a comment, is I have created a free training and I'm going to post it in the chat. So you will actually see it there in the chat. Let me see if I can go and put a post in here myself. Can I comment on this myself? It doesn't look like I can. I was going to post something. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What I shall do is I'm going to put in the chat. I'm going to put my own close and post. So there's a free training there. Anyone who's interested, I've put a free training together on how to do it. Today we're going to be talking about HMO. We're going to be talking about the housing crisis. We like to go there. We're also going to be talking about the different things that I'm seeing in the market about there's different views on the different housing policies that are being suggested by the government. And today I opened up my post box, and what did I find? Only this. Sinn Féin's housing policy was in my letterbox today. And so I kind of thought to myself, okay, we'll have a look at that and we'll see. We'll critique it and see what we think about it. And I'm also received something in as well from the Labour Party, and talking about all of the different things that they're working on. Housing is one of them, immigration, all this kind of stuff. So anyway, guys, it's going to be, as always, lots to discuss, lots to talk about. Happy to jump into questions, and I'll start going through some questions while we're here. The first one that I see is, hi, is real estate implementing any AI solutions in Ireland now? Yeah, I do know some people that are starting to implement it. I've started building my own, I've got my own, I'm working on my own custom GPT, and most of you guys are probably aware I have a podcast and I talk about property investment and real estate, and I do that every week as well. And I've been going now for 4 years every week, and tonight will be the 221st episode of the podcast. When did I start investing? 31 years ago. I started investing in 1993. I bought my first property in 93. And that's how did I get into it? So, well, I'm not going to, my first property, like pretty much everyone else, you buy your first property and it's like for you to go and live in. That's not really property investment. Of course, it is an investment, but it's not in the same context that you would say somebody who's going out and wants to rent a property and stuff. So the first time I bought one was a couple of years later, and I found a field in the west coast of Ireland. And the west coast of Ireland, there was a little town called Enniscrone in Sligo. Some of you may know this place. And the property was just a field. There was cows grazing on it when I first came across it. And I can remember thinking, oh, that would be interesting. And it was 25,000 to buy. It was an acre of land, and I was a newly qualified architect. So I understood how it works in terms of going and doing the drawings, making. I see somebody asking for tips on raising equity. I will be going through that now shortly. But found this piece of land and went and got planning permission. So being a trained architect at the time, I had only just left college a couple of years before. And so I was able to do the drawings of I was going to design 4 houses for this 1 acre. There's going to be a driveway up the middle. There was going to be 4 gates off the driveway. And after, it was probably a week of working on the project, doing different drawings and all that, submitting them all, putting a package together and submitting them and lodging them. And At the time, it was pretty small money to lodge for planning permission. I think I might have had to spend €37 per house or something like that, and lodged it. Took only about a week of my time in terms of drawing and everything like that, and then I waited for planning. Now it takes about 8 weeks for planning to come back, and sometimes they can delay that and they can push it out longer, because what they do is they come back and they say, we'd like additional information. So it's called AI as well. Additional information, please. And that allows them to stop the clock and look for more time. And so it can take a bit of time to get a planning permission over the line. 12 weeks, I think, is what I might have waited, maybe 8. I can't remember. It's a good while back now. It's about 25 years ago. But when I got my planning permission, I didn't realize at the time what was going to happen to the value of the site. I just knew that I had gotten planning. I got this letter in saying, your planning has been granted. And I was like, excellent. Now that's the first bit done. Now I have to figure out how I'm going to build the houses on it. And so I went and there was a local auctioneer. I had taken photographs when I was in the town, and I remember seeing an auctioneer's window, and the guy's name was Philip McCumasky. And I rang him up and I asked if he could help me to, put a price on the houses that, and also to tell me if there was any builders in the town that he worked with, maybe that he get me a phone number or something like that, so I could get the builder to price the job to build the 4 houses. And he went away. He said, yeah, I'll do that. I'll come back. He came back to me about a week later and he says, I spoke to a local builder. And if I remember correctly, I could be wrong now, but I think the guy's name might have been Seamus Brennan or something like that. He was a local builder anyway. And Philip, the auctioneer, just said, Gavin, he doesn't want to build the houses for you. He wants to buy it. You've got planning now ready to go. He'd like to just buy the site from you and he'll build the houses himself. And this wasn't, initially I was reluctant. I was like, no, I want to be the one who builds it. Like, I want to get into this is going to be my first project. I want to get into this. And he says, well, the guy's made a pretty good offer. And I said, well, what's the offer? 125 grand. And so I had bought this for 25 grand. I'd spent a week getting the permission and I lodged it. And 12 weeks later, it's worth 125 grand. And when I saw that, I was just, my mind was blown, because at the very same time that was happening, I was working as an architect, and I was in this small practice that I had created for myself. It was initially me on my own, and then a guy that I knew came in and joined me. And we were going out there, doing projects for whoever would hire us. It was very small practice. And I had this somebody contacted me and said a friend of theirs wanted to do an extension, and would I be interested? And I said, absolutely, give me the number. So rang them up, went out, met them, and it was a couple, and they were building a small extension on their house. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I did the drawings, gave it to them. They liked it, went off, got prices from a builder. The way it works as an architect, and as it did back then as well, was that they would tell you what their budget was, and their budget was 80,000 Irish pounds, which in today's terms, in terms of euro, the Irish punt versus the euro, I think it might have been like their budget might have been 110,000 euro, something in that kind of region. And you basically charged a percentage. And so I had said to them, look, I'll do it for 10% of your budget. And so they're going to spend 80 grand on the building work, and they'd have to pay me 8,000. And I thought to myself, this is great. And it took months and months and months of working. And then when the builder went on site, I had to be, going out regularly to visit and make sure he's doing it right. All of this stuff just took so much time. And at the end of it all, 8 grand was what I would earn, compared to doing a week's work on the property deal and making 100 grand profit on that. Just absolutely blew my mind that it was possible. I basically earned like 12 times more money on that one property deal than all of the work that was put into this architectural job. So it made total sense to me, get out of architecture, get into property, nothing else, just focus on property. And anyone who's kind of done architecture will know it's hard. Like studying architecture, it's a really good thing to study, but it's a long thing to study. It took me 5 years to get through college. And I took a year out in the middle. So it actually was 6 years between first year and the final exams. And that's a long time. Like there was other guys that I was friendly with that went through in 3 years. Some of them went through in 4 years. It was 6 years before I had my degree. And so, it's hard earned. And yet I didn't have any hesitation in leaving it to go into property, because I had started to learn pretty quickly that, as much as I enjoy designing and all that kind of stuff, it's just, I didn't find it to be very well compensated. And so I was a little bit disappointed at just the way the financial situation works. I found that I was always chasing after jobs. You'd be chasing to get a job, and then you'd be chasing for the money from that job. And so I spent more time chasing money and chasing work than I did actually doing architecture. And so to me, this was a little bit kind of like, what's the point? Like, I didn't get into this business so that I can spend all my time. I'm just trying to get rid of this shiny light in the background. I didn't get into this business so that I could chase people for money. I got into it to design and to work on projects like in the building sector and stuff. So anyway, that was my experience. That was my first job. Now, somebody asked a question about tips for raising money. And I've got a treat for you, because I actually, if you go and look at the comments down below, you will see I've left a comment. Now, the guys in Instagram will get this. The guys in YouTube will get this. TikTok, I don't seem to be able to leave a comment here myself. So if you guys in TikTok go into my profile and click on the link tree, I think there's the free training is there. You'll find it there. But the free training is in the comments anyway. If you click on that, I actually give tips on how to raise money and stuff like that. But I'll go through it here anyway. You can pin a comment here. Yeah, I'm trying to do it. Like, I just don't. Normally when I'm doing this stuff, I'm just talking and I'm not posting any comments and stuff. Oh yeah, I see comment there. Okay, posting it now. Let's see if I can do this. 1 second now, guys, and I'll post it. Here is the training, free training, and I go here and paste. There you go. All right, guys, there it is. Anyway, so raising money. First things first, you got to have a little bit of, before you go and raising money, like if you're trying to raise money from a bank, that's a different story. Let's start with the easy stuff. And it's not all that easy, but the easiest way for somebody who's starting out to raise money will be to go and meet with a mortgage broker. And when you're talking to a mortgage broker, just say, I want to go and I want to buy a property. And they'll ask you, okay, let's go through all the questions. How much are you earning? And that will, when you prove how much you're earning, that'll tell them exactly how much you're able to borrow. Like, what's your maximum? Because I think it's 4.5 times your earnings is the max that you can borrow. In addition to that, you have to be able to prove that you have the income to cover at least double the amount that the interest is. So if you borrow enough that you have to pay, we'll say $300 a month in mortgage payments, you need to show that you have like at least $600 a month coming in order to cover that. The banks don't want it to be like a hand-to-mouth existence where there's a risk that you might not have the money to pay the mortgage, because the last thing they want to have to do is turf you out of the property, because it looks bad for their image. It's also costly. It ends up going into court, and nobody's a winner in that situation. So the banks are pretty conservative about the way they lend their money. So go out there and meet with a mortgage broker, chat with them about how do you go about getting what's required. They will go over 6 months. Believe it or not, a lot of the banks will go over 6 months of bank statements, because what they're looking for are patterns. People will often sanitize their bank statement like a month before they go for a mortgage, because they kind of think to themselves, well, I want the bank to look at me in the best possible light. And so I'll make sure that I've got plenty of saved up, and I won't be spending any money for that month because I wanted to look like I've got loads of money. But the banks don't look back a month. They look back 6 months. And you might be able to fake it for a month, but it's harder to fake it for 6 months. And habits and patterns start to come out. So let's say, for example, if you enjoy a flutter on the horse racing or anything like that, that's a bit of a red flag for a bank. When a bank sees that you have, like, say, a regular direct debit to Paddy Power bookmakers or something like that, that's a red flag. They will think that, oh, this person likes to do a bit of gambling. That's not good in their view, because it could be that there's a race coming up, you get a tip, and you decide to go and I'll put 500 on that because it's a sure thing, and you don't have your mortgage and the horse doesn't come in. And there you go. Now you're trying to explain why you haven't got the money for the thing. That's what they're looking for. Those kind of little tells that will kind of help them just to work out, is this person a safe bet? So you need to go back over 6 months of bank statements, and you need to sanitize those bank statements. And mortgage brokers will help you do that kind of thing. They'll go in and they'll say, oh, this here, you got to get rid of that. And so if you wanted to go and buy something, you need to get mortgage approved first. And it's going to take you time to get mortgage approved because of that 6 month window. And so what you're going to do is look at all this kind of stuff and try to figure out, like, when are you going to, how long is it going to take you to sanitize your bank statement? You might only have to do it for a month or two, but if you've got something that's standing out 6 months ago, then you're going to have to, keep on making sure that you're just working through until you get to that point where it looks good. So you'll get mortgage approval, and then only when you got your mortgage approval can you go out and actually start looking for the property. And that's where it gets difficult. And that's where a lot of people get the burnout, because you've spent 6 months trying to sanitize your bank statement. And now that you've got that done, you're going out looking for property. But of course, everyone else is out there looking for property too. And so you're in a bidding war against other people. And for a lot of people, the frustration of bidding on something, getting your hopes up, and then somebody else is outbid you, and you're like, damn it. And, that's disappointing. Your emotions start to play at you. You start thinking, geez, maybe I'll never get a property because that one went for a lot more than I was prepared or I can afford to go for. And so it goes on like that. And so you need to sort of steel yourself, as in prepare yourself for a hard slog and disappointment, just so that you're actually prepared for what can happen, because it can be kind of disappointing and it can be difficult. And so once you're mentally ready for it, then go in, try. If you're buying as an investor, then it's different to if you're buying as a purchaser of a home. Purchasing because it's your home makes you far more emotional, whereas purchasing as an investor, you're far more logical, and you're looking for it to fit within some financial boundary, because if you're not in that financial boundary, then the property isn't earning enough and it doesn't look like as good of a deal. And so, whereas if you're bidding against, we'll say you're trying to buy a property to invest in, and you're up against two other people who are looking for a home forever, like for their family or something like that. You're the logical investor bidding against two people that are emotionally tied up. You're probably going to be blown out of the water by those two guys, because they will be much, much more keen to buy it, to conclude this deal, because it's for their family. And so they're emotionally wrapped up in this thing. So you do need to think about that. That does come into it. Okay. The next thing we were talking about is private investors. So if you're trying to raise money from private investors, and you can do this some of the time, people will give out loans, they'll invest with you. Maybe you've got relatives that would like to kind of partner up with you in a deal or whatever it is. That's a way that a lot of people can actually do it. And so it's worth your while. I see Jerry's comment there. I'll come back to that in a bit. But when you are speaking to investors, a lot of people, first of all, you got to be experienced, okay? Put yourself in their shoes, okay? Let's say you've saved up your money for months and months, and you've got 100,000 saved up. And I'm always amazed. There's young people writing to me in the comments, and they're saying, I've got 60,000 saved, or I've got 90,000 saved. I'm always like, wow, fair play to you for building up your savings like that. And the reality is that, if somebody came along and said, oh, I'd like you to invest in my project. I'd like you to take your 60 grand and put it into my project. What's going to happen to you? Like, what are you going to think about that? You're going to think to yourself, I could lose all my money. This guy, can I trust this guy? Does this guy know what he's talking about? Is this guy experienced enough? All of those emotions, they're going through the other person as well. So if you're approaching someone and saying, I'd like you to invest in my project, you need to be thinking about what are they looking for? And that what they're looking for is certainty. They are looking for certainty that if they put the money with you, that they're definitely going to get a good return. There's nothing worse than this fear of, Jesus, does this guy know what he's doing? Maybe I should wait for the next deal, or maybe I should wait for somebody who's more experienced. And that's why people who are good salespeople or people who are very smooth, they have a greater amount of authority in the eyes of the market, and so people invest with them. And that's how guys can scam you, because they can put across this authority in your eyes, and you can feel like, okay, this is great. Like, that's one of the reasons, particularly in TikTok, I have to warn people that there is an imposter pretending to be me. He has a very similar account to mine. Like, my account is Gavin J. Gallagher. The last time I checked, this person was Gavin J. Gallagher 02. But there was another time when I think it was the same person, and I think they got closed down, but it was Gavin J. Gallagher. So it looked just like mine, but instead of it being a J, it was an I. So it looked like Gavin I. Gallagher, but it looked very, very, very similar. So this imposter is out there, and what he's doing is, I don't know who he is. I have no clue, but I suspect he's trying to borrow my authority, that when I go and put out all these videos and stuff like that, he's copying those videos, he's posting them on his channel, and then he's writing out and letting on that it's me, and he's trying to scam you for, we'll say, Bitcoin or crypto scam or whatever it is. And there are people falling for this. And I do know somebody who wrote to me on LinkedIn and said, Gavin, why aren't you answering my emails? And I was like, what are you talking about? I have no idea who you are. And he's like, yeah, I invested money in your scheme. And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't have a scheme. What are you talking about? And he said, no, I put money in your guaranteed return fund. And I was like, I don't have a guaranteed return fund. Like, what? I hope you haven't been scammed. And he was just like, oh my God, don't say that. And I said, I don't have any fund. I don't offer investments to people online. I said, like, what I do offer is an education program on how to raise money and how to develop property and how to, investments work and all that, and how to become a property investor. But I don't actually like sell investment. And this guy went out anyway, and he went and he lost 70 or 80,000, thinking it was me that he was investing with. And these scammers got him, and then just broke off all communication. And then he was resorted to LinkedIn to connect with me to sort of see what the story was. So anyway, I told him, look, nothing to do with me whatsoever. I'm really sorry that you've been scammed, but you should get in contact with the Gardaí, the police, because there's nothing I can do for you. You got scammed through no fault of mine. And anyway, that's what happens. You got to be super careful. There are guys out there that are scammers, and that they're pretty good at convincing you that there's a guarantee and there's this and that and all that. And these guys even have websites, and they have like about me pages, and they have in this case, one of these cases, they had 3 directors listed on the website. I was one of them, and then there was 2 other guys. I had no idea who they were, but they had Irish addresses. And the Gardaí went out to these addresses and found that they were fictional addresses, and the names of the people that were on that were supposed to be at those were also fictional. And these guys, what happened is these guys had applied for passports and like to become company directors back during COVID, when there was no visiting the offices of these places. It was all being done online, and so they did everything while it was online, and so they were able to kind of get through the checks and stuff like that, you know. So anyway, you got to be really careful. Just if anyone reaches out to you using my name and says that they have a crypto, fair warning now, guys, I don't do crypto investments, okay? So let me have a look at some more of the questions that have come in. And Gavin, cash buyer in Cork, if was brought up in the town, cannot get within 5 kilometers of where they lived. Yeah, I know. I've heard about this. Like there's restrictions in rural areas where you can't build unless you were kind of born in a particular area or whatever it is. But I don't know if that's a question or what, but it's a bit kind of ridiculous. All right. Can somebody not buy outside of these areas? That's a question for that person. There's all sorts of rules around when it's kind of rural areas, what they don't want. Like there's really beautifully scenic areas around the country. And if you consider, I know one of them to be like, let's say Roundwood here and Wicklow and Glendalough and all these kind of places. These are beautiful, like absolutely heaven on earth, like beautiful landscaping and trees and everything like that. It's just amazing place. And it's so beautiful that if they didn't restrict it, there would be all of these, foreign people coming in and buying plots of land and like building bungalows and like holiday homes and stuff. The whole beautiful landscape would be littered with homes and bungalows and all this kind of stuff. We used to call it bungalow bliss back in the day, when you bought your plans for your house out of a magazine and said, oh yeah, that's grand, I'll get that built, please. And so it's, that's one of the reasons why those restrictions are there. But they kind of, like with all these things, they usually they start with a good idea, but it just gets pushed too far and you end up with a whole lot of people disenfranchised as well. Gerardo asks, I'm an investor, not a developer. Should I sell my vacant property that I can't let, or sell to a developer without going outside my comfort zone? Well, I think it all depends, like, on your location, first of all. Gerardo, I know where you're based. Like here in the Irish market, there's a couple of schemes that have been opened up, and vacant property now. If a pub, for example, use an example of a pub. If a pub has been closed for 2 years, and you can prove that it's been closed for 2 years, then you have what's known as exempted development, and you can go and you can convert that into residential. You don't need to go for all sorts of planning and things like that, as far as I know. Now, you want to go and check that out yourselves, but I was just reading about this the other day, and they're trying to just eliminate. A lot of pubs have closed down because of COVID and things like that, and so they've been closed for the last couple of years. And these pubs are often smack in the middle of the town, and it would be perfect for a residential property or something like that, or turn it into flats, apartments, whatever. And so those are the options. Like, to try to think outside of the box. Like, is there some alternative use? One of the things that we're seeing a huge amount here, and it's a very, very controversial subject, but it's asylum seekers. It's accommodation for asylum seekers. And at the moment, there is exempted development on that type of thing. And what the guys are doing is, Jerry, yes, Jerry to me, Jerry from Edinburgh. The thing is in Ireland, we have got guys now currently buying warehouses and factory buildings and putting them into residential units. And like, so you've got the warehouse, the roof and the structure overhead, and then they're building what is basically modular homes inside. And inside you've got this like very, very basic accommodation. And then these guys are going out and they're putting asylum seekers into it. And it's a scheme that the government offer, and they'll pay you per day an amount of money for the person that you're putting up. And it's very, very profitable. So there's a number of people doing that at the moment. And I know one or two of them, and these guys are doing it at scale, and like you can get a huge amount back. So I don't know if that's of any use to you, Jerry. Like here, there's obviously lots you can do with properties that maybe are vacant, sitting there. You just convert it into something like that. Is that an option? Probably not. Maybe not in Edinburgh, but certainly because of the housing crisis here in Ireland, there is a number of schemes that they're bringing in that are they're trying to get people to convert stuff that would otherwise just continue to be vacant. And so be worth looking in. Don't ever go out of your comfort zone, Jerry. and you know that there's a little inside joke there. Okay, when investing in a new build property, what would be the average cost once you get the house? I don't know what you mean by that, silver koi, but what I will say is there is no average price, because depending on where you buy it, the cost of building a new build property in Ireland, we'll say, is the cost, what it costs the builder versus what it costs the purchaser. The builder buys a piece of land, and let's say you buy a piece of land for $1 million and you put 10 houses on it. Well, then you have a site price of 100,000 per site, we'll say. And then on top of that site, you've got to build a house. You're probably talking about 300 to 400 grand to build a house on that 100,000 site. So now you're into 100, maybe 200, 400, maybe 500, maybe 600,000 purchase price. But if you go to, we'll say, the west of Ireland, or a rural area in Ireland, you can buy that same amount of land for maybe 200,000, and maybe you'll get 10 properties on it as well. So suddenly your site price is 20 versus the 100. And so that can be a big difference across the country. And then in addition to that, the living costs in Dublin are much, much more than the living costs in, say, the West Coast. And so I've spoken to builders that are charging in Dublin an awful lot more than the same person would be able to get in the West Coast. And so you have huge variance. Now, I saw that the Central Statistics Office brought out something a little while ago, and it was the residential property price register, it's called. And they tell you how much the property prices are increasing on a monthly basis, year on year. And this also breaks down the cost of houses, the average cost across counties, and a cost across air codes. We have what the UK call postcodes. We have air codes, and the variance between the top and the bottom is insane. The average house price in the air code F45, which I understand to be Castlereagh, I think it is, F45 is 139,000 is the average price of a house in that air code. And if you travel to Dublin, to the Blackrock area, which is A94, which is where I was living until last year, A94, the average house price in A94 is 740 grand. So there's a 600 grand swing between one air code and another. So you can see, when you say what's the average cost, there is just no average except in your small locality. So you should go onto the Central Statistics Office website. It's very easy, cso.ie. And when you go in there, you will find a lot of that data, and just look for the property price register or the property price index, and that's where you'll find it. How about raising equity, i.e. sourcing an equity partner for a plot or development land? Well, it's like all these things, it depends on the amount of what you're bringing to the deal, we'll say, okay? All partnerships that you're looking at, there's a give and take in a partnership. So if you wanted to partner with me, what do I have to offer you? I have years of experience. What do you have to offer me? What do I get in return? Maybe you find the deal, you'll do all the running around, you'll be working on the deal and stuff like that. Maybe by having me involved, maybe when we go to a bank or something like that, the bank are more comfortable because they have somebody with a lot more experience in the partnership. So you can see how a partnership, the sum of both halves adds up to more. So it's like 1 and 1 equals 3 when you have 2 good partners. If you partner with the wrong person, you don't get that sum. If you find somebody who has, we'll say, just money but no expertise, and let's say they had an insurance payout or something like that, and they're sitting on a pot of money, and they're like, yeah, I'll give you some money to go and put into that plot of land. But if you're doing your first ever deal, we'll say, and you don't have any experience, like there's a good chance that you'll lose it all. You'll lose all of his money, and you'll lose all of your time and effort that goes into the project if you don't know what you're doing. Like, it's a really steep learning curve. So what I would suggest, if you are looking to partner with somebody, is to set your sights a little bit lower initially and try to partner with somebody, as we'll say, some sort of a junior partner who is going to learn a huge amount from the partner that you're working with, who has a lot more experience. If you do that, then first of all, you're going to be able to say the next time you're speaking to somebody's, I did that deal over there. So now you have experience, but also you've learned working with somebody who has a whole lot of experience and has done all of this stuff before. So you're less likely to make a whole lot of mistakes, and you're less likely to get caught in that way. And that's something that is really valuable. Like, there's an old saying, I think it was Alex Hormozy I heard saying it, and it's that you can either be learning or you can be earning, but rarely you do both. And so when you're at this early start of your career, you should be focused on the learning part, not the earning part. If you go out there and you say, I'm only going to do deals that are making me money, well, you're probably going to find that you're going to have to do those deals yourself, and you're not going to be learning because you don't have somebody there helping you along the way. And so if you're focused on, I'm only interested in the deals that pay me loads of money, the people who could teach you don't want to pay loads of money. They recognize the value of their skills and their expertise, and to them it's an unfair deal. So set your sights slightly lower, be kind of humble, and I'd love to learn from you, all that kind of stuff. That will help, and then you'll end up partnering with somebody with a load of experience that can actually benefit you in so many different ways. That's how I would suggest it. Look at your skills. What are you like? Do a strength and weakness assessment. If you've got loads of strengths, play to those strengths, but it's inevitable that you'll have some weaknesses. So you need to find somebody that fills in those weaknesses. And I see it all the time. You'll go out and you'll partner up with somebody who has the very same skills as you. And so it's 2 guys, both strong in one area, but weak in another. And so you end up in a situation where the partnership didn't actually enhance the joint venture in any way. And you really end up just with 2 people, both trying to do the same thing, both good at one particular skill, and neither good at the thing that you actually need to do. So bear that in mind when you're thinking about raising money. Let's have a look at some more questions. So when I said it was a controversial subject, I think it's kicked off a couple of comments here. So let's have a look. Stop tapping your card multiple times to take out cash at the ATM. I don't know what that's about. What's your opinion on the rent to buy scheme? I don't really have much of an opinion because I haven't been looking at this heavily myself, but I understand from speaking to somebody that they're living in a house and they're paying rent to somebody, and that person would like to sell the property, And rather than evict, like what happens is you have to evict. If you want to sell a property, traditionally speaking, you want to evict the tenant so that you're selling the property as a vacant house. And the reason you do that is because most people who are buying, they don't want the headache of having to remove a tenant. And so it's much easier for you as the person selling the property. If the house is empty, you just can sell it. Now, because there's a massive housing crisis, that has become really difficult. What happens is you go and you want to sell your property, you go to your tenant and you say, listen, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to be selling the property, so I'd like you to leave now. So off you go and find another place to live. And in this market, like, that can be extraordinarily difficult. And so the person can be looking around, like genuinely looking around, and cannot find a property. And so they cannot move out. And it's hard for you to ask somebody to become homeless and say, I just want you to move out. Like, I don't care about your situation. I don't care about your kids. I don't care about the schools. I just want you out so I can sell the property. Like, that's not going to fly, really. And so this is what happens. So that what this scheme that you're talking about is, it's where this problem has been recognized, and what they're saying is that they will basically assist the renter in buying the property from you. And so what they'll do is they go in, they inspect the property, and they agree what the price is going to be, and then that's basically paid to you in some sort of a structure with the renter. And so the renter, you end up selling the property. The renter doesn't have to move out. You end up selling it to the renter, but with the help of the local authority. I think that's the scheme you're referring to. I think it's a good idea, but I don't know anyone who's actually done it. Would you chance the defective apartments that banks won't lend on? Fireproof defective? Yes, I think I would, and I'll tell you why. Here's a scheme that I know about because I was involved in this, but it's quite a few years ago now, so it may not apply to all the cases that you're looking at. But there was a property for sale, and it was a half-built. Well, it was more than half built. It was about 95% built apartment scheme. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think there was 75 apartments or 76 apartments. So it's kind of a big scheme. And the builder had gone bust, and they had gotten to 95% of the completion. And so it was put on the market for sale, and the person that I'm friendly with went ahead and wanted to buy this. So he asked for my help. He said, what do you think work needs to be done? And we want to buy it, we want to finish the work, and we just need to kind of quantify how much work has to be done. So got involved. As it turns out, I had an architect friend who was a project manager, and I got him involved, and he was one of these incredibly fastidious, meticulous guys. And he went in with a pen and paper and went around every single room looking for all of the various defects and jotted down every single one of them. Went up into the attic, inspected the roof, inspected the fire, the partitions up on the roof, everything. Now, you need to be really meticulous person, and you need to know the rules so you know what you're looking for. It would be no use you doing this if you're not in that game, because you wouldn't know what to look for. Whereas fire stopping, all that kind of stuff, that's all very important. And when it comes to health and safety, it's actually covered by criminal law. So if you buy a place like that and a fire burns the whole thing down and people are hurt or injured or killed, you can actually go to jail for that. It's not a case of you saying, sorry, I had no idea. Like, because it's a criminal case, there is no pleading ignorance. Like, sorry, I had no idea. Like, I thought it was fine. That you're still going to prison. And so you really got to be very, very careful when it comes to this kind of thing. So you need a super meticulous guy. I had that guy, sent him in, went and he did this inspection. It was an incredibly detailed inspection, and came out and said, it's pretty well complete. Like, we don't have that much work to do. in the scheme of things. It's not like 80% done, it's like 95%. And so sat down, did the mathematics on the numbers, sort of, we're going to have to do this. We went and put prices against all of that work. And we reckoned we would probably be able to do the entire thing for about 2.5 million, more or less. All of the work remaining, about 2.5 million. So then it was down to, okay, what would we bid to buy these apartments? What can we get away with? And the guys that were selling them, it was a bank, it was like a receiver sale. They were putting it on the market. They were giving no warranties, no guarantees. They were saying, all at your risk. There is absolutely, we're not giving 1 inch of assurances that this is good or anything like that. It's completely at your risk. And so somebody could go and buy that, not do their homework, and then realize, oh my God, it's 10 million to fix this. And that would be a massive risk. But because we had such a meticulous guy, it was only 2.5 million. We knew the numbers down to very small detail. And so put in an offer of 6 million for 76 apartments. Do the maths on that. That's getting them at an average price of about 10 grand. And this was in Dublin. So this was a very, very good price. So anyway, bought the property for 6, spent about 2.5 million. So the total spend was maybe 8.5, maybe with the various professional costs, maybe it crept up to 9. And we were getting some huge sum of money every month in rent, first of all. But then after about 3 years of hold, the market had risen to a point where I put it on the market for sale and somebody bought it from us for 33 million. And so that is possible. You really do have to do your homework so that because you could just as easily buy it and it bankrupts you if you get it wrong. And also you've got to be able to give assurances to the potential purchaser that you're going to profit from it eventually. You've got to be able to give that person the assurances that you did all of the work. And so that's why you need to be super meticulous. Like, it's no point in doing this and, I'm sure it's grand, that's not going to cut it. If you are selling it to somebody else, you need to be able to go in and have a full professional team to sign off on everything. And so you can actually rectify the thing. It's just that the banks are not going to touch that. The fireproof that's defective can be repaired and fixed and replaced, but it will cost you money to do that. But after that's all done, the question is, can you buy it at a price that after all that work, you've actually made a profit? A lot of the time I would suggest you probably can, but you got to do your homework. And like, there might be some schemes that are different to others and don't have anywhere near the amount of completion that we had. So that was an amazing deal. Like, literally 3 or 4x our money, but those are rare enough, those kind of deals. Let me see. Next question. Fools and the money are easily parted, from Fergus. Okay, so 475k for an 80s 3-bed semi D in Roughish Estate in Selbridge. Overpriced. It sounds pricey, all right. I know somebody buying in that area, and he would have bought for about 350, but it's he bought it in very poor condition. So it depends on the condition that you're buying it in. If it's been done up by somebody, like, at the end of the day, are you the only bidder on this property, or are there multiple bidders on this property? If there's multiple bidders on the property, then it's going to go for what it's going to go for. But if there's no bids on it and you're being asked by the seller to put in a bid, and when you put in a bid, they're like, oh, that's not there yet. That's where I'd be worried, because I'd be thinking, hold on a second, I'm bidding against myself. If you're bidding on something and there's another bidder, you're in a competitive bid. Now, the other way to look at that is perhaps it's there can be some unscrupulous estate agents that decide that they're going to put in a fake bid to push up your price. And you got to be wary of that. And sometimes you can test it by just pulling out or saying, you know what, I actually think I'm going to pull out. And if the agent sounds very nervous when that happens, then you kind of go, well, let me know if it's still on the market in a week, and you'd be back, oh yeah, it's on the market. Now, if it's not on the market in the week because the other person is genuine, then obviously you might need to put in another bid. But you really got to just think about the psychology of it. How badly do you want it? If you wanted something really bad, then there's a good chance that you're going to overpay for it. Whereas if you're more rational and logical and methodical, and you're just sitting back and saying, you know what, I don't need any property that bad that I'm going to overpay for it. This is why emotion is such an important thing when you're looking at property. If you are buying property and you have any kind of an emotional attachment to it, it can make you do silly things. It can force you to buy at a much inflated price. Or greed, that's the other one. And that's an emotion as well. So if you're greedy, then you can overpay as well. Sean says, I have 19K remaining on an apartment, looking to buy a house. Should I pay off the apartment first? Well, it depends really on your finances, but you could. One of the things to think about here is how much money can you earn from the apartment, and would that additional income that you'd be getting in, 19K is not that much. That's should be maybe 6 or 12 months of income on the property itself, depending on what kind of rent you're getting. But if I had a year of rental income coming from an apartment to pay off the 19, I would just do it over time rather than put the 19K in, and then go out, and when you're talking to a bank or a lender about buying the house, you've got your salary, but you've also got the rental income from this other property, and you've only got 19 grand of a mortgage on it. So you should be, you should have plenty of equity there. But it all depends. Do you want to, one of the things you've got to think about is what's your long-term objective? If your long-term objective is to grow a portfolio, then that's great. But if it's just cash flow, you've got to bear in mind that you're going to pay tax on a certain amount of your income, and so you're going to be left with what's what the remainder is, and you can only offset the interest, not the full mortgage amount. When you're paying a mortgage, it's made up of two payments. One is the interest, and one is payment of some of the capital, and you're only entitled to the interest, not the capital. Prime secondary retail investments in Edinburgh selling at around 5% yield. Interest rates to borrow at 7%. Cash buyers creating a bubble. Yeah, that sounds a bit mad to me, Jerry. I would not be rushing into that, honestly. But it depends, first of all. Is that what everything is going at, or is it specific ones? Because sometimes there can be a particular reason. Maybe the street is going through gentrification, and so it's there's a bit of a buying time, and you buy at 7%, but that rents are going to start creeping up because the area is going through gentrification or something like that. There might be somebody assembling a site because they want to develop a row or something like that. I look at things like that as to whether it's site assembly or whether it is some sort of bigger picture, or it's quite possible that people are just they are emotionally attached to the area. You'll find that there's somebody who's done well living in that area. He's done quite well for himself, and he just wants to own in that area. And you'd be kind of like, but why don't you buy 30 miles down the road and you can get it at a 9% yield? And sometimes it's I know this area, and so there's a certain element of inertia, and when there's inertia, it becomes kind of difficult to push back on that. People are just kind of lazy, and they want what they kind of know, so that's something to consider. Hey man, do I want to hire a copywriter? Not on this call, I don't. So let me keep on going. It's morally wrong what you're doing housing them. I presume you're talking about the asylum seekers or something like that. I don't know. I mean, that's a debate that I'm not going to have here, whether it's morally right or wrong, but we'll go on. I'm planning in for 2 semi-detached houses. Where do I go to seek investment to build? Well, the first things first, Graham, what I would suggest is you have a site or something that you bought, and whatever you paid for it before you have planning permission, now that you have planning, that value has gone up. So revalue the site, get it valued by somebody that works with banks so that you have a realistic figure, and that will give you some additional equity in the deal, we'll say. I know when we've bought sites, you buy a site for say 2 million or something like that, and then when you've got your planning permission, you go and revalue it, and it might be worth 3 with the 3.5 with the planning permission in place. So that can actually make it a lot easier to get your investment. Usually when you're actually going ahead and building something, the bank will lend you a certain amount of the funding. So I think what I've seen is that the bank will lend about 50%. I think it's about 60 or 70% of the work in progress. And so if you are building, you will have to put some money up yourself. And that is, I don't really think you can get away with that. And so that's why you're probably going to have to partner with somebody. But if you own the site, the land outright, then that's a good start, because you'll have increased the value. And so that is essentially collateral that you're putting forward, No, he's not. I don't know. There's an argument going on somewhere there. Okay, I'm going to look at the next one. What kind of house is best for quick cash flow? Which is the best location? Well, there's a lot of stuff going on in that question. You got to, first of all, and I've said this before quite a few times, but the model that a lot of people are looking at now is certainly in the Irish market. I know Jerry is in Edinburgh, and there's already regulations around HMO in the UK. But in Ireland, there is no regulation around HMO. And so what people are looking at is buy a property with, say, 4 beds and turn the downstairs living room into another bedroom. And then maybe there's even space out the back to extend out and build a 5th or a 6th bedroom. And once you've done that, you actually rent out each room to people, individuals, and that there gets you 6 professionals paying you rent is always going to be more than 1 family paying you rent on that same house. And so it's an intensification of use, and we see a lot of people doing that now. Now, it's not all golden. Like, you go and do that, there are some headaches that come with it, because you're not managing 1 house anymore. You're managing 6 individuals, and that can be problematic because, like all things, there's interpersonal relationships get in. You might have rented to a couple of guys, and maybe 2 of them are hotheads, and they start having rows and stuff, and that can put the others in the house off and stuff. So what we've actually been doing, which works much, much better, is to find a company that is trying to house staff, and you go to the company and you say, I will let you rent the 6 rooms for your staff, but you pay me 1 check every month for the equivalent of what I'd be getting if this was on the market. And you also pay the electricity bill and whatever other bills are coming in. And so you end up with just collecting a check every month or every quarter, and those guys take care of everything else. That is a really, really nice way of doing it, because otherwise you're into managing all the beds. And one of my coaching clients is doing this, and he's done it a couple of times now, and it's really good, because he says that one of the contractor that hired it, he's bringing in workers from abroad to go and work on a new contract that he got to build something. And he was saying that the house isn't even full. Like, he's getting paid for all. In his case, I think he built an 8-bedroom HMO, and he's getting paid by the builder who rented the entire house. He's getting paid for all 8 rooms, but only 7 of them are occupied at the moment because they're looking to hire somebody else, and they're going to keep that room for that person. But that's not the hassle. Whereas if that was in your control, you'd be the one having to do all this. So something to consider. So that is probably the house for the best for cash flow, but you've got to be careful about it. Which is the best locations? It all depends on the price that you're paying, and you've got to. It's very general question to ask. If you think about it from the point of view of if you're buying in, we'll say in central Dublin, the prices in Dublin are very, very steep. But the rents, even though the rents are very, very high in Dublin, they're not high enough to justify the purchase price. And so you end up in a situation where it's probably better to move further out of the city and go to, we'll say, the kind of the commuter belts. And in the commuter belts, you'll find that you can buy houses at about half the price, but the rents are probably around the same that they would be, maybe, a couple of percent cheaper than Dublin, but not half, the half the price goes down, but not half the rent goes down. And so that's the thing to look for. And some of my clients, when I say clients, by the way, guys, I have coaching programs and things like that, and I've posted a free training this evening in the comments. I've pinned a comment. I think I pinned a comment anyway in this in the chat. So certainly it should be the first comment of the night. And if you click on that, it'll talk about this free training. But at the end of it, there's an invitation if you're interested to join my accelerator. And I have a new intake for the accelerator at the end of this month. And if you join it, you are going to be joining a bunch of guys that are all doing this kind of stuff. And so you'll learn from them. If you're not, well, this is not for beginners. I'll just make that kind of clear. This is for people that are probably, working as a builder for other clients. And you're saying, you know what, one day I'd like to be the one that's building the houses for myself. If you're one of those, then you're spot on for the course. And then other people that are, professional people that are working long hours, that are paid well, but they're kind of married to the job, like they have to work long hours, and they're thinking, you know what, I would much prefer to be building a portfolio where the rental income is coming in, and I don't need to, go out and work to actually earn that rental income. That's the way. So anyway, that's who the course is aimed at. So let me know if you're interested. Click on that link, and that you'll see there. It says it's a link to gavinjgallagher.ck.page and then roadmap. And if you look at that, that's a little training that I've done for you. Now, next question. Let's see. Is it hard to get planning permission to convert normal house to HMO? You don't actually need planning permission if the work is all internal. So let's say you're not looking for any hassle with planning and stuff like that, and you've got we'll say a 3-bed semi, and you can turn that into a 4-bed by just going downstairs. And most houses, most traditional 3-bed semis have got a front living room and a back kitchen, or you might have a back kitchen, a back dining room, and what you could do is convert that into maybe 2 additional bedrooms and a kitchen. Maybe you can do a small extension out the back, but you might not need any permission. You don't need permission to go from house to multiple to HMO, because a HMO is just house sharing, essentially. If somebody decides to go and rent a house to one person, and that person brings in flatmates, what's the difference between that and what you're doing as a HMO? It's exactly the same. And so that's how the HMO, it's basically sharing a house. But if you look at the traditional sense of sharing a house, the way it works is you have a house, and let's say I decide to go, I'm going to rent this house, I'm going to pay $2,000 a month. Now it's me who's out trying to find flatmates to share the house with me so that I can split the cost. And that's a lot of headaches for me. If I'm busy in work and stuff, I'll be thinking, geez, I don't need the headache of going out trying to find a tenant or trying to find 2 other flatmates. And so along comes this nice landlord who says, Don't worry about that. Just rent the bedroom. And instead of paying $2,000 and you have the headaches of signing up all those bills and you're the one who has to kind of like arrange your friends to pay you back and stuff, I'm just looking for 800 for the room. And the other rooms, it's up to me to fill those rooms. So you can see, it's quite an attractive proposition to most people. And so that is why the HMO model works. So what are the requirements to achieve a grant for doing up old buildings? So there's a lot of, okay, when you're doing up old buildings, there's a lot of different things you got to be careful of. First of all, if a building is a certain age, it can sometimes be listed. And if it's listed, then it's very difficult. Like I owned a building on Herbert Place on the Grand Canal in Dublin 4 area. And it was built in the 1850s, I think it was. And so, historical kind of building. Had to go and get an archaeologist to write a report on its architectural significance. I think it cost like $5,000 to get that report written. And then you get, you submit that and they come back with all these conditions and stuff. And I can remember, like, if your house is particularly architecturally significant, you get different levels of listing. So it's like I can't remember the terminology exactly, but it's like class 1 listing or a class 2 listing or whatever. And you can have it's so tightly managed that you're not even allowed to paint the house without planning permission. So that is like when it's super tightly, and that's probably because somebody famous lived in the house or something like that. If it's like a house that the Easter Rising was like, Michael Collins lived in it or something like that. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. Then they don't want you to do anything to the house. So I'm going to keep on going, and then what I'll do is I'll jump into a couple of other questions. So in Cork, if you have a property land to sell, they will not give you planning permission. Yeah, like that's what I said earlier. There's a lot of restrictions. Gavin, I have a friend that wanted to buy a site. The council knocked him because he did not live 5 kilometers from the property. Yeah, there can be various rules in certain areas. It's like different county councils, different local authorities have different restrictions and stuff. What they're just trying to prevent people from, what they would term as blow-ins arriving in and offering you, and saying, oh, I'm going to throw up a load of houses here, and you end up with all of the local people kind of upset about it. What are the first 3 sources to use when staying up to date the Irish market and the economy? Okay, well, what I do is, like, I have my podcast. So obviously, if you want to stay up to date on stuff, you can listen to my podcast, which is one thing. But where do I get my news? Like, I will go on the Irish Times. The Irish Times, I have a subscription for the Irish Times, so I get it 7 days or 6 days a week. It comes in and I just go scroll through the paper, and I'm looking for anything to do with property, anything to do with housing, anything to do with anything that touches property, construction, housing, building, planning, anything like that. And also economically, I'm looking at what are the banks doing, what are the rates, what are the mortgages like. So there's a couple of keywords that just instantly, like, I've trained myself. The moment I see them, I kind of like, zone in on the, and what I'll do is I'll screenshot the page. So I just keep that, and that's there then. And then at the end of the week, I often go through it to have these calls and stuff like that, and I can go through it and say, okay, this week I'm going to I'm going to do a podcast about this topic, and I'll have all of the articles saved up. The Business Post, it used to be called the Sunday Business Post, but now it's called the Business Post. That is another news source, and they do stuff on property. Like, there's a lot of newspapers. There's the Indo, and there's the Cork, there's the Examiner. Used to be called the Cork Examiner, now the Examiner. And so there's a couple of different options, but the one I like is the Irish Times, and it's kind of one that and the Independent are kind of the mainstream ones. And they have a Wednesday commercial property section, and they have a Thursday residential property section. So that's when all of the ads for, different estate agents got posted. And if somebody is trying to sell their house, usually the estate agent will say, we'll give you a little square on our back page or whatever it is. And so that's a great way to do it. Then I subscribe to other, the thing is what you got to remember is Ireland is not, we don't set our own interest rates. Our rates are set by the European Central Bank. So I'm actually always paying attention beyond simply the Irish market. So I have a couple of subscriptions for different things. I subscribe to the Financial Times, and the Financial Times can be a bit boring at times because it's like most of the time it's not to do with Ireland and it's not to do, but a lot of the time it'll have something to do with something that will impact economically the markets in some way. If the stock market's going to collapse tomorrow, I want to know about it, because there's this kind of adjacency, and you can end up that just because you're in housing and you don't have any shares doesn't mean that a collapse in the stock market might not impact your housing portfolio. And the reason it could impact it is that everything is kind of interconnected now. So property is funded by banks. Banks are funded by investors and lenders and the ECB and all this kind of stuff. And if consumer sentiment changes direction, if everyone is buying like crazy, if you go back, think about during COVID, initially when COVID kicked off, it was crazy. Everyone was panicking. There was lockdowns. Obviously there was a lot of businesses that got into deep trouble financially and stuff, because your customers are not coming into you now. If you owned a gym, you're screwed. If you own a restaurant, you're screwed. If you own a hotel, you're screwed. But then there was other businesses that were doing fine. If you had online sales and you were just selling digital products, you had an absolute bonanza, because everyone was sitting at home on their laptop all day or their iPad, and you're able to buy whatever, and you've got all this additional money because you're not spending it in the gym, you're not spending it in the restaurants, in the hotels. All you did was sit at home. So there was a bonanza during that time for different businesses. So after a while, there was people sitting at home, furloughed, maybe still earning money, but working from home and stuff. A lot more disposable income in their hands. Some people, they moved out of rented accommodation and they moved back home with their parents because they thought they're going to be there for, this could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. As it turns out, it went on for nearly, a couple of years. And so what happens, you ended up with loads of people saving up loads of money. And so interest rates were reduced. And because interest rates were reduced and everyone had saved up all this money, it pushed inflation. And I've been watching this the whole time. And inflation, once it started creeping up, and it started creeping up quickly, what's the next thing that happens when inflation goes up? Interest rates follow. And as soon as interest rates started to follow, all of a sudden this kind of euphoria and the party atmosphere that was going on, gone. And what was the impact of that? Crypto collapse straight away. All of a sudden people are saying, uh-oh, we're in trouble. The market's changing, sentiment is changing, cost of money is getting more, let's whip our money out. And so sure enough, everyone started whipping their money out all at the same time. Not working anymore. That's it. You're out of business. And so FTX, like all of these different, Celsius, there was all these different crypto exchanges and crypto, investments, and they all went to shite. It's funny. People don't want to hear this. When they're investing in property, they don't want to hear bad news. When they're investing in crypto, they definitely don't want to hear bad news. When you're investing in shares, you don't want to hear bad news. That is called cognitive bias, or in particular, it's called confirmation bias. And what you have got is your mind, there's all these shortcuts that your brain takes. And investors are particularly prone to this, but everyone is prone to it in some shape or form. And what you have is, let's say you own a load of crypto shares, and let's say the share price has crept up for the last couple of years, and you've been riding a wave and everything's been going great. You feel great, and you feel like, you're smart, you spotted something nobody else saw, you're doing really, really well. And suddenly along comes somebody like me, and I say, it's all bullshit, that's going to collapse in value. What happens? Massive pushback. When I went and made a podcast about crypto, and I thought that the prices are going to fall, all this, and the amount of people that were really like upset with me for saying that, they were like, Gavin, you don't know what you're talking about, this, that, the other. Sure enough, the collapse took place, and then they're like, oh my God, Gavin, you were right. But nobody wants to hear it at the time. Why is that? Like, why is it? And it's called confirmation bias. What you're looking for when you have made a decision and you like that decision, you're not looking for data to help you any longer. You're looking for data to confirm that you're right. And so when it's a little bit like watching the American election stuff that's going on, the people that love Donald Trump cannot stand whenever there's bad news about him. They're all like, oh, it's politically motivated, it's this, it's that, it's the Democrats all saying bullshit. Like that's absolute out and out confirmation bias. They don't want to hear anything that is negative about their guy. Equally, the guys on the other side, it's the very same. If it's anything bad about their guy, or if there's anyone saying anything good about Trump, they're totally negative about it. And it's, rather than sitting back and saying, hold on a second, I have not made my mind up yet, let's get the facts and let's review all of the information and let's do it. And then after we've done the review, then let's decide whether or not it's a good or a bad decision. And that's the way you would do it if you're entirely logical and rational and you're thinking in a very objective way as opposed to subjective way. And that is the kind of mindset you want to bring to investing. You want to be bringing your mind, you want to be very, very clued in about what you're thinking. And it can be difficult to do that. If you're thinking about something and you're daydreaming, like, do you know that you're daydreaming? At the time when you're daydreaming, you don't. But sometimes you can kind of just suddenly go, oh, like I was daydreaming. But the thing is that's going on all the time. Your subconscious is constantly talking to you, even though you're not aware of it. And what you need to do is you need to question your behavior. If you suddenly decide, you know what, I'm really hungry, I need to go down and get food, that isn't necessarily hunger. That might be psychological. That might be just you looking for comfort food or something like that. It's the same with investments. If I come along and say that crypto deal looks crap, and you get upset with me, and you're kind of thinking, what does he bloody well know? Okay, ask yourself, why are you getting upset about that? Is it because you are invested in crypto and this is me pushing against your preference or your thoughts? And if that's the case, you need to analyze, like, okay, here's somebody giving me data. I don't like this data, but why do I not like this data? Is it possible that I'm wrong? And if you're doing that, you might do the analysis, and at the end of it, you might say, you know what, I've reviewed it, I've had an open mind, I've decided that I haven't made up my mind yet, I'm waiting for all of the data to come in. And now that the data has come in, I still haven't made up my mind yet, but I'm leaning towards this direction. Fair enough, you've done your assessment. But if you're like, no, that's all bullshit, I don't want to hear that, then that's confirmation bias. You're caught up in it and you don't even know. And the thing that's very common, by the way, 70% of people are not even aware that they are being swung by their confirmation bias. There's lots of different types of cognitive bias. There's one called continuity bias. And we are in that now, I would imagine, for a lot of people. And that is that there is a housing crisis. House prices are going up. Rents are going up. And so there'll be a lot of people out there who kind of think to themselves, yeah, it's just going to keep on going. It's just going to keep going up and up and up and up. And that is continuity bias. That is where you believe that what's currently happening will continue to happen. Now, what you might do, if you want to be smart and conscious about all this stuff, is just, question everything that you're thinking through a different lens, and just say, you know what, I feel I'm right, but let's just do another review of the situation. Like, where could I be wrong? Could banks get into difficulty? Could the housing market disimprove? Could something happen that shocks the international markets and causes there to be sort of like a complete change of everything? And it's quite, it's quite unlikely in one sense, but then nobody saw 2008 coming along, or very few people did. Like, if you guys have seen the movie The Big Short, it explains in a lot of detail how the 2008 crash took place. And when you see it, you can see it was driven by greed. It was driven by these bankers that were so greedy that every time they made millions, they got to keep millions in bonuses. So they didn't give a shit. Like, they went out and they were selling, they were doing loans. There was all these nicknames they came out. One of them was, what was it called? A dinky, double income, no kids. And that meant like that, oh, this guy has got loads of money. But then there was and Nino, I think it was, no income, no opportunities. And that was a person, but they were actually able to lend money to people that had no income. And they're like, oh yeah, here you go. You can have this beautiful house and you only have to make these tiny payments. And of course, they didn't tell them the small print was that after 3 years, those tiny payments reset to the proper amount. And it was like massively over what they could afford. And so there's all sorts of sort of things that go on in your head that don't allow you to kind of see that you're doing something on autopilot and you're not actually even aware of the dangers. I'll give you another example. Can't remember the name of this one, but it's an easy example. If you bought two properties, here's an example now for you all to think about. Let's say you bought two properties and you bought both of them for 100,000 each. Okay, so you've invested 200,000 in the market, one for 100 and another for 100. And let's say you hold it for 3 years, and at the end of 3 years, one of these properties is now worth 200, and the other one that you both bought them both for 100, one's now at 200 in value, and another one is at 50 in value. And I told you, okay, you have to sell one. Which one are you going to sell? So if you guys want to, we can turn this into a poll right now and go and put in the chat, which one are you selling? Are you selling the one that's at 200? Or are you selling the one that is at 50? So I'll give you a second to write it in the chat if you want. But as we're talking about this, what I'm going to do is I'll explain. So most people are going to say, of course, you sell the 200. Yeah, D has just answered 200. That is what and then Stapo has said 200. That's what the vast majority of people will say. That's because cognitively it seems like the right answer. But the reality is that if you buy something and it goes from 100 to 200, and you bought something and it went from 100 down to 50, what's happening there is that you are reluctant to crystallize a loss. You're thinking to yourself, shit, now I'm after making a bad purchase there, so I'm going to keep that one because hopefully it'll bounce back. And I'll sell the one that's done really, really well. That's what most people think. But the reality is, if you think about it from a much, much more scientific kind of way, is if it went from 100 to 200, then it's quite possible that it'll be at 250 or 300 before long. And the one that fell from 100 to 50 could languish around 50 for another couple of years. And that's what happens. So there's an old saying in the stock market is that you cut your losses and you ride your winners. And that is exactly what you would, that's the kind of probably the correct answer, is that you would sell the 50, the loser, and you would keep the one that's doing really well, because the likelihood is it'll continue to do well. Even though that might not sound intuitive, that is typically what happens. In the stock market, there are so many people that I know that bought shares in 2008 in the banks. I'm one of them. I bought AIB shares and I bought Bank of Ireland shares, and I paid like a couple of euro per share. And then they were nationalized by the, in the crisis, and their prices fell to like practically zero because they were nationalized. And then the shares are still listed there, but they're down at they were down at 5p at one stage. And I was like, I'm not selling them, because it's like I have to crystallize a loss of like 25 grand if I decide to sell them. And so I just kept them. And today, 17, 18 years later, those shares that I paid 25 grand for, they're maybe worth 3 grand or something like that, like 17 years later. There's a perfect example. Now, at the same time, I bought Kingspan shares at the time, and I put 25 grand into Kingspan. And I can remember I put it into a pension, so I wasn't dipping in myself. I wasn't like, this is the good thing about having a pension, is that you tend not to dip in, because you can't touch the money. And so I just bought 25 grand's worth of AIB, 25 grand's worth of Bank of Ireland, 25 grand's worth of CRH, and 25 grand's worth of Kingspan. And I locked it away in the pension, didn't touch it, and I forgot about it. And then 10 years later, I can remember looking at my portfolio. I got a letter in saying, here's a list with your portfolio update on it. And I was like, oh, Jesus, yeah, I wonder like what happened to those investments. And I knew 2 of them had gone to shit, because your 25 grand on AIB, I knew it was like zero. 25 grand on Bank of Ireland, gone to zero. And so I was thinking to myself, Christ, so I'm probably looking at about 50 grand in that portfolio. Opened it up. I think the number was 370 grand. And my mind was blown. I was like, how much? And I remember opening up and seeing, and Kingspan had gone from the 25 grand I bought it had jumped up to something like 120 grand. And the Kingspan shares, the CRH went from 25 to 120, and Kingspan went from 25 to 250. And I can remember thinking to myself, my God, like if I had been playing the markets, like if I'd been the guy making the decisions, instead of locking away in the pension where I couldn't touch it, if I had like it on my phone and I was looking, I probably would have sold both of those when they hit, like, instead of 25 goes to 50, that's a great time to exit. And instead it went on to 120. And in the case of Kingspan, 25 goes to 50. Oh, great time to get my money out. That went on to 250. And it's the same with Bitcoin. I was living in Spain when I first discovered Bitcoin. And I can remember at the time that I was told about Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin was $92 per Bitcoin. And, obviously nowadays it's in the thousands, but, or tens of thousands, I should say. And at the time we were going to buy 4,000 euro worth or dollars worth of Bitcoin. And so do the maths at $92, like, there would have been quite a few Bitcoin purchased for 4 grand. And I can remember that was on the weekend, we were chatting about it. And then on the Monday we said, okay, let's go ahead and buy this Bitcoin. And the price jumped in those days while we were basically placing the order. And it went from 92 to 141. And I can remember when my pal rang me, said, it's gone from 92 to 141. I can remember saying, shite, we've missed the boat. Let's not bother going ahead with that investment. Because it went from 92 to 141, I didn't want to do it anymore. And obviously it went on into the thousands. And that's the way. But I don't beat myself up over that. Like I do the calculations now, and I think if my 4,000 investment today might be worth like 4 million or something like that. But the reality is because of the very same cognitive bias, if I had bought 4 grand's worth of Bitcoin, probably by the time it hit 8 grand, I'd be selling out. And definitely by the time it hit 40 grand, I'd be selling out. But you would never think in your wildest dreams that it would go on to 4 million in value. And so like almost nobody would have been foolish enough to buy something for 4 grand and just keep it and just like decide that you're never selling it. Because that's just not the way typically we work. Until years later, you started to get those memes like the guys with the laser eyes and stuff like that. And so then all of a sudden you can kind of see why people are doing that. Let's see if there's any more questions. Let's see. Have you any experience on permitted development? If so, can you share? Like when you talk about permitted development, you're talking about the UK. I'm not an expert on permitted development. I know here in Ireland, we call it exempted development. And I know a little bit more about that. But like really, I'm looking at commercial property most of the time. I'm not really looking at permitted development. So I probably will read up on that to have a bit more, to be able to answer a bit more. I have a question. Do you see the potential downfall or exodus of US tech companies from Dublin as a potential risk to house prices here? I'm thinking over a 20-year time horizon. That's from Kean. Kean, I think that's a very smart thing to say. I don't know what I've done on the phone here, but it's started doing weird stuff. The reality is, yes, I think there is a risk. And I actually did a podcast on this not so long ago. And what I talked about was AI. And I think that there is quite a bit of risk around artificial intelligence, because what's happening is people like the big tech companies. So let me just roll back to the beginning. We have a housing crisis in Ireland, and prices have gone up, and loads and loads of houses are being built now. No investment has been put into power stations. Like we have a finite amount of power generation in this country. Obviously, we're going out, we're building the windmills out in the sea and all that kind of stuff. But we have traditional, hydroelectric power, and we have some coal burning, all this kind of stuff. But the reality is that we haven't added to our power generation in years. And now we're at a situation where the housing crisis is at this point where the power now needed for all of these data centers that are being built is starting to eke into the amount of power that is available for housing. And it's getting like the demands for data centers are getting really, really big. And I've been looking at artificial intelligence, and I've been watching Sam Altman's talks and all of this, the guy from OpenAI and Elon Musk and stuff. And the reality is that the big unlock for artificial intelligence is now power. They talk about compute, and they talk about these huge data centers where they have all of these server farms and stuff, and that's how they create the compute. And that's, you can think to yourself, okay, that's great. That's why Nvidia's stock market shares have gone to make it the most valuable company on earth, because everyone's buying these GPUs, I think they call them, or whatever, that Nvidia supply. But the reality is that the next thing down that they need, in addition to all those servers, is power to actually run them. And anybody who has looked at a data center or been involved in constructing a data center, the way they work is they put all these servers in, and they throw off an enormous amount of heat. So much heat gets thrown off these things that they need massive cooling. And so they have all these air conditioning systems. And I know in the various buildings that I look after, commercial buildings, anytime there's a comms room, where there's all these all these servers and stuff. There's usually 2 or 3 air conditioning units as well, because they're on full blast, like cooling the place, so it doesn't get too hot. And that's what's happening. So what's happening in Ireland is all of a sudden our power generation is hitting a wall. We have so many data centers being built and so many houses being built that the power is about to hit maximum. And the government is suddenly realizing, oh my God, we're at maxed out. And what are they saying? Okay, well, I guess we're going to have to give the power to the people. We're going to have to give it to the human beings who need it for their homes. We're not going to give it to the data centers. And if you're not going to give it to the data centers, then the data centers can't grow. And what's happened? Sure enough, in Dublin, there is now a moratorium or a ban on the building of data centers. And who wants to build data centers? Big tech. So that is why over the weekend you might have read that Amazon has decided that it is not going to spend $35 billion in Ireland building data centers. That's what they decided. They decided that we can't build them because there's restrictions and there's not enough power. So they're going to spend $35 billion somewhere else. And I think this is a big risk for this country because, and the guy in Amazon said, I saw it in the paper today, that Ireland used to look at the kind of foreign direct investment from big US tech companies. They used to think of that as this, amazing gift that we're receiving, and we should be so grateful for it. Nowadays, it seems the opposite. It seems like, yeah, we're always going to have the American guys coming in here with the big companies. And so I think complacency is creeping in. And if we're not careful, you could suddenly have somebody, some big firm could turn around. All you need is another European nation or another English speaking. Like we have the advantage here that we're English speaking and we're in the Euro. England is English speaking, but it's no longer in the EU. And then you go to other countries where English isn't their first language. So that is one of the advantages that Ireland holds. But if you suddenly offer, if you had a company in, or like say the Danish government or the Swedish government decided, like, let's bring tax down to the same as the Irish system, I would imagine those guys will just go there and they could get the power that they need. And the reality is artificial intelligence is so important now. It is the next generation of, in terms of where the tech sector is going, it is the future. And so we have a situation where, we rode the wave. We got Meta, or we got Facebook in Ireland. We've got LinkedIn in Ireland. We've got Twitter in Ireland. We've got Amazon in Ireland. We've got Google in Ireland. Like the FANGs, as they call them. They're the FANGs are the top companies. Facebook, Apple, Amazon. N is for, what is it? Netflix. G for Google. Like all of those companies are just the biggest of the biggest. And they're all here for the tax breaks and stuff like that. But those guys are now all starting to look at artificial intelligence, and they, in order to be keeping up with the rest, they have to make massive investments in data centers. And if we're not able to give them data centers, then they will go elsewhere. And I think that is a major risk for us. Now, if you're looking at a 20-year time horizon, I think that is a risk. I said it in my podcast a few weeks. Like, if you guys want, go on Behind the Facade podcast and look up. I think the episode talks about AI or whatever it is. But in that episode, I said that I think that data is the new gold, and that, or the new oil even. And we are very similar. Ireland is currently sitting in this really, really nice position where we have all of the tech companies in Ireland, and now they want to build, data centers, and they want to do AI and all this. And I think AI is going to unlock massive abundance. It could also, create a lot of grief with job losses and things like that. But it's generally speaking, it's viewed as creating massive an abundance of everything, and we could be the most important hub in Europe for that. And that would mean that this little country that we're in could be similar to Qatar. I lived in Qatar in the Middle East for a year and a half. And in the time that I lived there, this tiny little country, about the size of, I don't think it's much bigger than Phoenix Park. Like, it's really small. And that city, that country there, it's bigger than that, but it's about the size of, we'll say, Dublin, the entire country. And that place is one of the wealthiest places in the world. They have one of the biggest gas reserves in the world under the sea. That is the Qatari kind of oil field or gas field. And they have all these plants. I drove up to the north of of Qatar, the peninsula, and you could see all these the burn-offs and stuff like that from these huge chimneys. It's really impressive, like billions and billions of gallons of gas being put into these huge big tankers that float and deliver it under pressure. That's Ireland, except with data being what we have to offer. We have the tech companies here, and the tech companies, because they're already here, they would just like to go and build their data centers here. And we could be this small country that is suddenly incredibly well positioned to take this massive investment that's coming. Or we could be a bunch of idiots that lets it flow down the river to somebody else. And I'm worried that we could actually screw this up because everyone is so focused on housing and immigration and stuff, and nobody is really focused on power generation. But that could actually be the most important thing that we could do if we want to unlock the wealth for the future. Of course, housing is massively important now, especially if you're a homeless person and things like that. But think about the people out there that, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, imagine this nation is pulling in 100 billion a year in surplus. We would be the wealthiest nation on earth. And that's my view anyway. So let me see, guys, we're coming near the end of the talk. Normally I finish around 9, but I'm already going over. Let's see. Will OMCs have a role in new housing estates without apartments where there is a planning condition for a management company? Hard to say. Well said, Gavin. Thank you, Don. Sean, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't really want to get into that question right now, to be honest. It's a bit late. What are your thoughts on Ireland building a nuclear power station? Could we ever go that route? I think there's two, one of the problems that we have in Ireland is that we have a long memory, it tends to be, and we tend to remember negative things. To give you an example, Ireland at the moment, there's this narrative that we have got that landlords and developers are greedy bastards, and that if you're a tech billionaire, then you're a genius and you've done amazingly well and you should be applauded. But if you're a person who earns money from renting a property out, or if you build houses and you sell them, you are a capitalist scumbag. That is like the kind of vibes that you get. And when you see that, you kind of think to yourself, shit, what is the narrative going? Why is it that we are seen as the enemy? And it's just because of the housing shortage, and it's creating this kind of problem. And now, so that's the negative, but it actually goes back to 2008. When the 2008 crash took place, everybody blamed the developers. And it was because they were the most visible bunch, first of all. Like, if you think back, some of you might be too young to have remembered this, but I was in the middle of all this. And I can remember you had a bunch of, we'll call them the golden circle, we'll say like 12 to 15 people were like the Midas touch brigade. And these guys had billions at their disposal. Like they were building huge projects and they were borrowing billions. Like, I mean, some of these guys had billions in debt from the banks and things like that. And they were, being lauded in the newspapers as titans of industry. And everything was just going amazingly well for all these guys. And then the crash took place. Now, these guys, in 2006, these guys would have been flying around in choppers. They had private jets. They had huge mega mansions and stuff. And so really lavish lifestyles. I can remember being at, what was I at? I used to follow all the Formula One and stuff, and I was at Silverstone, and I can remember flying into Silverstone on a helicopter and just never seen anything like it, just helicopter after helicopter after helicopter coming in. And that was the first Formula One that I ever went to. And I can remember it being so dramatic seeing all these choppers coming in. Well, in 2006, that's what it was like at the Galway races, because the Galway races was where all the developers congregated to go and meet the Fianna Fáil tent. And I can remember like just one helicopter after another landing. And in 2006, I think if I remember correctly, there were 136 helicopters registered that year. That's how many people. This tiny little country had 136 people buy helicopters. And so really, really highly visible. And so when the crash took place, everyone remembered those bastards. They're the reason that austerity has been introduced. They're the reason that the country's on its knees. They're the reason that my business is now in deep shit and all of this kind of stuff. And so that's what happened. Now, at the same time, Sellafield over in the UK, Sellafield is a nuclear power station. And since the 80s, I can remember there being talk about the Irish Sea being radioactive because of the waste that's being poured from Sellafield into the sea. And so my view is that, yes, we should build nuclear power station, but I would imagine, politically speaking, it's a little bit like suggesting that let's go and give tax breaks to all the developers to start building much, much more houses. It might be a great idea, but politically, nobody is going to go near it because it's just way too politically difficult to sell it. If you were to say, we need to build thousands more houses every year, like how are we going to do this? We need to, we're building 33,000 houses a year. We need to build 90,000 a year. We need to get back to what it was like back in 2006. The only way we're going to do that is by saying, right, guys, no tax on any money that you make building houses for the next 10 years. Wham, you would see a massive, everyone be moving to Ireland to go and do all this kind of stuff. The amount of money that would pour in, we'd get the housing built. But you can be sure that the government that are currently in government would be out of government because it would be so unpopular, the thought of giving all this tax breaks to these guys, that they'd be out of a job. So they're not going to do that. They want to keep their jobs. So they have to do what people like. And I imagine if somebody said, right, we're going to build, nuclear power is a really clean way and safe, even though it's got, when things go wrong, they go very badly wrong. But generally speaking, it's pretty safe. If they were to say, we're going to build a nuclear power station, and we're going to plonk it exactly here, everyone in that area would be out picketing and it would be turned into a big bun fight. And they'd probably, whoever was part of that decision would be out of power as well. So you can see the memory and the political danger is the thing that drives all this stuff. And so that's one of the big things. Tom Cullen. Hey, Gavin, how's it going? Tom, nice to see you. What's your forward-looking view on office and logistics here in Dublin? I think office is struggling. I think logistics will continue to do well. SDCC, South Dublin County Council, refused plans for a number a number of weeks ago for a data center development due to lack of power. Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And you know what the thing is I've heard that, I've also heard various things. You've got people there that are now starting to sort of, whenever somebody was building a data center, they were building a data center and they were putting in what is referred to as redundancy. They were putting in a diesel tank that would fuel a diesel generator that would be there only in the event of a power cut. And now, because it was only there as a fallback measure, you didn't need to get a special license to have, I think you need an industrial license to have a generator, because if it's only going to be occasionally on, like in a power cut, then you don't need that license. But if it's going to be on a regular basis, you do need that license. Well, now all of a sudden, all of these guys are all being told you have to get a license. Why? Because they suddenly realize that power is now such a problem that the likelihood is we're going to have to tell those guys to put themselves on the generator instead of on the grid. And so that's another thing. Madhead, do you read YouTube chat? Wondering if you were leader of Ireland, how would you fix housing crisis? What laws, regulations would you remove? Good question, Madhead. I would say, it's funny, I did a talk last week. I had to stand up in front of the FIABCI, FIABCI it's called. And they asked me to give a talk on exactly this. How would I fix the housing crisis, essentially? And what I said was, I think probably the biggest issues, one of them is the narrative. I was just talking about how landlords and developers and anything to do with property, we are scumbags in the view, to a lot of people. And I think that needs to change. The industry needs to be viewed differently. We need to be viewed as like saviors, in a sense. The housing crisis is one of the biggest problems facing this nation, and we are qualified to fix it, and yet we are pilloried as like scumbags and capitalist bastards and stuff. And the reality is we're the guys that are going to fix the problem, but we're seen as greedy for doing that. And the reality is, if you wanted to go and offer a whole load of money to us, we'd probably be able to do a lot more, but it's just politically unpopular to do that because of the narrative. So that's one thing I would try to fix. But the other thing is the planning system. The planning system is not fit for purpose. And I've said this a couple of times on my podcast and stuff, but the reality is that the Planning Act, just recently, they were talking about overhauling the planning, and overhauling the planning would really be a good, smart thing to do, because there's so many bottlenecks and issues and stuff with it at the moment. But if you were to overhaul the planning, what I would be doing is starting from scratch and writing a new planning act and saying, right, here's how we streamline the whole process. Here's how everything is going to be sped up. Here's how we're going to get things done going forward. Decisions are going to be made in weeks instead of months. You're going to be able to lodge everything online. We're going to use machine learning and artificial intelligence to speed up some of the more mundane decisions and stuff. You're going to be able to predict whether a decision is likely. You're not going to be able to have guys objecting that live on the other side of the country. You have to have a genuine reason. You're not going to allow people to shake you down. There's a whole lot of people that are out there and their job is just to shake down developers and say, hey, I'm objecting to your scheme. Why? Because pluck a decision out of the sky. Because the grass, because there's a rare snail that lives in this farm next door, and you're going to destroy it. And you kind of go, okay, well, we can do something to help you fix that now. We can fix it for you. And then the guy pulls you in and says, listen, I want to whisper in your ear, it's all bullshit. I just want you to pay me money. and I'll go away. That's exactly what's happening. And that's not illegal. That should be criminalized. So all of this stuff would make a massive difference. And instead of writing this new planning law or planning act and saying, guys, we have a brand new document, everything has been fixed, all they did was open up the existing document and add in and tweak and like amend bits here and there. And so the Planning Act runs to almost 800 pages. Try to understand 800 pages. Like, how would you know what the decision is going to be if you have to read 800 pages to understand it? And the other thing is, like, when you go in and apply for planning permission, somebody can write within a month an opinion and can say something like, I disagree with this. I think this should be rejected. Now, the planners will make their own mind up, but the fact that you wrote a letter gives you the right to appeal that decision. So the planners might look at everything and go, you know what, this is a good scheme. We're going to grant permission. Bang, there you go, Gavin. There's your planning permission. What does this guy do? He's not happy about it. He sent in a letter, and so he takes you to the board. And so the appeal process begins, and that adds 9 months to the decision. And so you're there. You were thinking you were going to be starting your project in 8 to 12 weeks. Instead, now you're looking at another year of delays until you'll have a decision. You don't even know if you're going to get the go-ahead, just a decision. So at the end of that period, you kind of think, okay, finally, now I can go and do it. Nope. Now the person who doesn't get the decision they want can go and take a judicial review against that decision as well. So it's like a third round of appeal. And so it's a nightmare. You end up in a situation where you can't win. And so huge amount of developments are delayed. And then what's happened, it was in the paper today, because of these delays, projects that would have gone ahead didn't go ahead at the time, and now they're no longer viable because interest rates went up or whatever. Something like 50,000 apartments for Dublin area have been abandoned now because the project to build them has been abandoned because they're no longer viable. They would have been viable 2 years ago because they would have been able to be sold to big funds at a price. But then when their interest rates crept up, suddenly the project was no longer viable. So all of that gone, and not to come back, Guys, we're getting near the end. What I'll do is I'll do another 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to close it out. So I'm going to read from Tom again. I recall shouting hi out the window of my car to you a number of months ago. Yes, Tom, I remember you now, the white Beamer. Completely agree. Read data centers, future here, lack of energy. Yeah. Other government changes to lowering corporation tax rates. Yeah, I think so. What is your background of East Point? Do you manage, operate the park? Yes, I look after East Point. I'm one of the original developers, and I run the show there and look after 2 portfolios in it. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Do I think the developers' contributions levies and Irish water waivers will be extended to 2024? I've been hearing different things about that. Like, your guess is as good as mine. Like, the budget is coming out soon enough. If they got a big budget to kind of give out and they allocate Irish Water a load of money, then it's possible that they'll be extended. Do you think the government will extend the development fee waiver? Yeah, I imagine anything that can help you develop a property, I would imagine there'll be some supports for that, but they're not always that helpful, a lot of these guys. And then quantity surveyor for the bike shed and the security shed needs a pay rise. Yeah, okay, so I went and I visited the famous bike shed in Leinster House. 336 grand to build 18 bike units. It's just ridiculous, but that gives you an example. I see in the chat a lot of the time, I see people saying, why isn't the government building housing? And there is a perfect example of why it isn't. They're just not in a position to do it. Like if they were to do it there, it would be all of that kind of thing all over again. It would just keep on happening. And if you remember back to the 1980s, or those of you who remember this kind of stuff, I was a kid, but I do remember my dad telling me about the way it works. And like they would have all these workers that worked for the corpo. They would be out digging the holes and fixing the roads and doing all this kind of stuff. But on the weekends, like what they would do is they'd go down to the yard and they'd fill up their car with concrete blocks, cement bags, all this. And they would it would all be the stuff belonging to the corporation, but they'd throw it into the car and they would do nixers on the weekend. And so, there was so much inefficiency because of that. And that's what they're talking about bringing back. And I just don't see it. And then all this kind of buying cancel units for the government on 600K. Yeah. Anyway, guys, look, gotta go. It's 9:30. I've been 2 hours at this. In fact, it's just gone 2 hours as of this moment. So that's my call. Guys, nice to see you all. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to end it now. But those of you who are joining late, maybe missed it, go and have a look at the YouTube channel, Gavin J. Gallagher, and you'll find the entire talk is recorded there. So guys, hope you had a good one. Talk to you soon. All right.